Hello, in this video we're going to look at performing the one jumper calibration method with FiberTEK 4. In a separate video we looked at the different methods, the 1, 2, and 3 jumper calibration methods. So this video is going to look at performing the one jumper calibration method. To start, we have the FiberTEK modules in the FiberTEK and the handset turned on, and you want to make sure that the power has been on for at least 5 minutes. That allows the handsets to warm and come up to temperature. The diodes, the LEDs and the laser diodes will increase their power output for the first couple of minutes. Now, it's only a few hundredths of a dB, but in some cases where we have test limits that are just 1.5 dB or 1.4 dB, that tiny amount of power can make a difference. After we've let the handsets power up for at least 5 minutes, we'll go ahead and perform the field calibration or set reference. In the user interface, we call it a set reference. We use the term set reference field calibration interchangeably. To get to that menu, you hit the preferences icon in the upper right hand corner and then press set reference. And when the FiberTEK module is attached, you'll be presented with this diagram. So the first thing to look at is at the top, it tells us what the current setting is for the number of jumpers and the type of reference. So it's starting with one jumper normal. To cycle between 1, 2, and 3 jumper, we push the soft key down here at the bottom left, and it shows 2 jumpers, and it shows that at the top. 3 jumpers. Now with 3 jumper, we get a little different indication. It's showing an MPO and an MPT connection here, because that's usually when we perform a 3 jumper reference. And then back to 1 jumper. The mode will change between the normal mode where we're using 2 handsets and a loopback mode where you're using 1 handset. So the loopback mode is done when you're testing a cable where you have both ends available to the same handset. So an example would be if you're testing a pre-terminated link or a drum of cable that has connectors on it, you can attach both ends to the main handset instead of using both the main and remote handset. So we're gonna go back to 1 jumper standard mode, and we'll go ahead and connect our jumpers. So we'll connect it between the transmit of the main and the receive of the remote. So something to look at here on our remote is the RX LED. So right now it's off because there's no light coming into it. It will detect light from the FiberTEK and also light from any other source. So for example, if I just aim it up at these lights in the room, we might see it starts flashing red. And that's because it's seeing the infrared component of the light that's coming from these lights over me. But it's red because it recognizes that's not light from a FiberTEK. Now, when we get a FiberTEK light source near it, we'll start to see the green LED flashing. Get the cable out of the way. And it's because it detects that as light from a FiberTEK. So even without performing a test, when you're arranging your jumpers between the 2 handsets, you can make sure the polarity is correct because it will only flash green when it sees light and when it's light from a FiberTEK. And we'll connect the transmit of the main handset to the receive of the remote, or transmit of the remote to the receive of the main. And likewise, we'll see that light flash. But now since the second fiber is connected, we'll also get the chirp for that it's now sees the partner. And once we have that confirmation chirp and the light is steady, we can push the start key, bottom right, and it's going to run a set reference. So what it's doing is measuring the power from each handset and storing that value. And when the test is run, the auto test is run, we measure the power at that point, which is going to be lower than the power we're measuring right now. And the difference between those 2 values is the loss of the cabling system. So now that it's complete, it's showing us that we should disconnect from the receive of each handset, and we only disconnect from the receive. So once you do a set reference, you never ever disconnect from the transmit port, because the transmit port is a very fine alignment between the fiber and the transmitter itself. And so when you disconnect and reconnect, it will never be exactly the same, and there'll be some loss offset there. Conversely, the detector on the receive port is very large. So when you disconnect and reconnect your fibers, it will be quite easy for it to line up and hit that detector. So disconnect those, and then the next step would be to plug in the set of jumpers for our measurement phase. So it is a one jumper reference that we did, but we need to have a second set of jumpers after we perform the measurement. So we'll now connect the second set as shown. So now we have our 4 jumpers connected, and we're ready to test. And the reference value is shown on the screen here, and it gives us the power that was measured at the end of the field calibration or set reference process, which is minus 19 dBm. So we know that the power output is good because it's in the green section. If the connectors are dirty, we'll start to see that power drop, or if the cables are bad or have any damage, we'll see that cable drop, that indicator drop down to a point where it's getting into the red. You can still perform measurements at these levels, but the problem is that you run out of dynamic range. So eventually you might run out of power, and if your cables have a lot of loss themselves, the system may not be able to measure all of that loss. Now it can measure on multi-mode more than 40 dB of loss, and on single mode about 50 dB of loss, which is a lot of loss, but that's just an indication. Also, if it's going down below the good range, it's also an indicator that there might be dirt on your connectors. And if there's dirt on your connectors, when I connect that to the cable I'm testing, that we will end up transferring that dirt to this cabling now, and the dirt just spreads and has a great way of contaminating or cross-contaminating every time you plug a connector into it. So make sure you're in the green range. If not, clean your connections and then hit the try again button down here at the bottom right, and it will just run that calibration again. But we're satisfied with this, so we hit OK, and we go back to the previous screen. So that was an explanation of the 1 jumper calibration. And in other videos, we'll look at the 2 and 3 jumper calibration a little bit quicker. We won't have to go through all this amount of detail. Thank you for watching. I'm Dan Barrera.